The autumn wind in rural Ohio always carried a bite this time of year, sharp enough to cut through even the thickest flannel. It whipped across the small hillside cemetery on the edge of Milford Township, rustling the last stubborn leaves that clung to the maples like reluctant memories. I stood there at the graveside. Jack Harlan, 62 years old, retired mechanic, hands buried deep in the pockets of my faded red and black jacket, the one Eleanor had patched at the elbows 3 winters ago. The sky hung low and gray, heavy with unshed rain, pressing down on everything like a physical weight. It matched the ache that had settled permanently in my chest since the morning 2 weeks earlier when I found her. Eleanor Harlan, my Ellie. 40 years of marriage, -2, and she was gone, just like that. A heart attack, the doctor said. Quiet, merciful, in her sleep. No warning, no long illness to prepare us. One night she kissed me goodnight, smelling faintly of lavender hand cream and the chamomile tea she drank every evening, and the next morning she was cold beside me. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. How does 38 years of shared life end so suddenly? How does the woman who laughed at my terrible jokes, who raised our daughter with me through lean years and better ones, who knew every scar on my hands from years under hoods and engines, simply stop being? The casket was polished oak, the kind they call timeless in the funeral home brochure. I hated it on sight. Too shiny, too perfect. Ellie would have said it looked like something out of a fancy catalog, not for folks like us. We were simple people, farmhouse on 10 acres outside town, vegetable garden she tended religiously, garage where I still tinkered with old Fords and Chevys for neighbors who couldn't afford the dealership prices. She liked things plain and honest. The flowers on top were white chrysanthemums and a few late roses from her own garden. I had cut them myself the day before, hands shaking so badly I nicked my thumb on a thorn. The service was small, the way she always said she wanted it. No big spectacle, just family, a few neighbors who'd known us since Sarah was in diapers, and the boys from the old garage, guys I'd worked alongside for decades before the plant shut down and the garage turned into more of a hobby shop. Pastor Wilkins spoke in his gentle, measured way about eternal rest and the love that never dies. I barely heard him. My eyes kept drifting back to the casket, willing it to open, willing this all to be some terrible misunderstanding. Sarah stood a few feet to my left, our only child, 35 now, sharp as a tack, partner at a mid-sized law firm in Cleveland. She wore a tailored black suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. Dark sunglasses, even though the sun hadn't shown its face all day. Her hair, same chestnut color as her mother's, was pulled into a tight, professional bun. She hadn't cried once that I could see. Not at the viewing, not at the house afterward when neighbors brought casseroles and Jell-O salads. Not even now. Maybe lawyers learned to keep the tears inside. Maybe she got that from me. Beside her stood Mark, her husband of 8 years. Tall, polished, always dressed like he was about to close a $1 million deal. Today he wore a charcoal suit and a black tie so perfect it looked pressed 5 minutes ago. His hand rested lightly on Sarah's lower back, protective, supportive. Or so it seemed. I'd never quite warmed to Mark. Something about the way he smiled too quickly, the way his eyes flicked to his phone every few minutes, even at family dinners. But Sarah loved him, and that was enough. Or it had been. They had driven in from Cleveland the day before the funeral. Sarah hugged me when she arrived, held on a second longer than usual, then pulled back and said, "We're here for you, Dad." Mark shook my hand firmly, offered condolences in that smooth baritone he used for everything, from ordering coffee to negotiating contracts. They stayed at the Holiday Inn in town, said the farmhouse would be too crowded with memories. I didn't argue. The house did feel too full of ghosts already. As Pastor Wilkins moved into the final prayer, my phone vibrated against my thigh. Once? Twice. I ignored it. Funerals aren't for checking messages. But it buzzed a third time, insistent, almost angry. I slipped it out just enough to glance at the screen, keeping it low so no one would notice. Unknown number. The text was short. "She's not gone. Trust no one. Check the policy." My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought the people next to me could hear it. I stared at the words, willing them to change, to disappear. A prank? Some sick kid messing with the grieving widower? But who would know my number? And why now? Right here, right at her grave? I looked up slowly, scanning the small crowd. Old Mrs. Patterson from down the road dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Hank and Rita from the garage stood shoulder to shoulder, heads bowed. The Johnsons, our nearest neighbors, held hands. Sarah and Mark, Sarah still staring straight ahead, Mark whispering something in her ear. She nodded once, barely perceptible. I shoved the phone back into my pocket, hands trembling. The pastor said amen, and people began to move, murmuring condolences as they drifted toward me. I nodded, said thank you, shook hands, accepted hugs, everything on autopilot. Inside, my mind was screaming, she's not gone. How could she not be gone? I'd held her hand in the hospital morgue. I'd signed the papers. I'd watched them close the casket at the viewing 2 days ago. I'd seen her face. Peaceful, yes, but unmistakably still. Dead. And yet, the word policy stuck in my head like a splinter. Life insurance. Ellie and I had taken out policies years ago. Nothing extravagant, just enough to cover the house and give Sarah a cushion if something happened to both of us. Last year, though, Sarah had insisted we update them. You never know, Dad. Better to be prepared. Ellie had agreed, said it was sensible. I signed whatever she put in front of me. I always trusted her judgment. Now, I wondered. After the last person left the graveside, Sarah approached. She removed her sunglasses at last, revealing eyes that were dry but red-rimmed. Maybe she had cried in private. "Dad," she said softly, "you shouldn't be alone tonight. Come stay with us in Cleveland for a few days. The house is too quiet." I shook my head. "I need to be here, honey. With her things, with everything." Mark stepped up beside her. "We understand, Jack, but the offer stands. Doors always open." I thanked them, watched them walk back to their black SUV, least special, Mark always said proudly. The engine started with a low purr, and they pulled away down the gravel road, taillights disappearing into the gray afternoon. I stayed until the cemetery workers began lowering the casket. The mechanical whine seemed obscene in the silence. Each clod of earth that hit the wood sounded like a door slamming shut forever. When it was done, when the mound was smoothed and the temporary marker placed, I knelt in the dirt and placed my hand on the fresh grave. Ellie, if there's any truth to that message, if you're somehow still out there, give me strength, because I don't know if I can do this alone. The wind answered with a low moan through the trees. I drove home in my old Ford F-150, the one with 240,000 miles and a tape deck that still worked. The farmhouse sat at the end of a long dirt lane, white clapboard faded to gray, porch sagging just enough to remind me I needed to fix it before winter. Ellie's flower beds lined the walkway, Mum's still blooming bravely despite the cold. Inside, the house smelled like her. Coffee, lemon polish, the faint trace of her perfume. I didn't turn on lights, just sat in the living room armchair, the one where she used to knit while I watched football. The silence was deafening. Hours passed, maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning. Then my phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. "They lied to you. The body wasn't hers. Look at the signature on the policy change. You never signed it." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I stood, walked to the roll-top desk in the corner where we kept important papers. The folder was there, labeled Insurance in Ellie's neat handwriting. I opened it. The policy was on top, dated 14 months ago. Beneficiary changed from Jack Harlan, Swipe, to Sarah Harlan Bennett and Mark Bennett, equal shares, and at the bottom, my signature. Accept. I pulled out an old check register from 2 years back, compared the signatures side by side under the desk lamp. The one on the policy was close, very close, but the loop on the J was too perfect. My J always had a little hitch, a hesitation where my arthritic thumb jerked the pen. This one didn't. Someone had forged it. The room tilted. I sat down hard on the floor, back against the desk, staring at the papers. They lied. The body wasn't hers. She's not gone. Trust no one. I thought of Sarah's dry eyes, Mark's too perfect smile, the quick way they filed the insurance claim. I had overheard someone at the funeral mention it in passing. My daughter, my only child. Could she? No, impossible. But the signature said otherwise. I sat there in the dark for a long time, the weight of betrayal heavier than any grief I'd felt so far. Outside, the wind howled louder, rattling the windows like it wanted in. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small, terrified voice whispered, "What if she's really still alive? What if they took her from me? And what am I going to do about it?" Chapter 2. Digging Deeper. The first light of dawn crept through the lace curtains Eleanor had hung herself 20 years ago, painting thin golden stripes across the worn hardwood floor of the bedroom. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, the anonymous text floated behind my lids like a neon sign in the dark. "She's not gone. Trust no one. Check the policy." And then the forged signature on the insurance policy. My own hand, but not my own hand. The loop on the J too smooth, too deliberate. Someone had practiced it. Someone had wanted it to look exactly like mine. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. The old timbers creaked like they were mourning too. The clock on the nightstand ticked past 6, then 7. Eventually, the smell of stale coffee from yesterday's pot pulled me upright. I shuffled to the kitchen in my slippers, the linoleum cold underfoot. I boiled water for fresh coffee, more out of habit than hunger. When the eggs hit the skillet, they sizzled, but I couldn't taste anything when I finally sat down to eat. Everything was ash and cardboard. Grief does that. Or maybe it was suspicion turning my stomach into knots. My phone sat on the table like a live grenade. I hadn't received another message since last night, but I kept glancing at it anyway, half expecting it to buzz again. When it finally did ring at 11:47, the caller ID showed Tom Riley. Relief and dread hit me at the same time. "Jack?" Tom's voice was low, careful, the way he used to talk on the radio when he was still on the force. "Meet me at the diner, noon. Bring nothing but yourself, and don't tell a soul." The Milford Diner had been a fixture on Main Street since before I was born. Red vinyl booths, checkered linoleum, the constant smell of frying bacon and brewed coffee so strong it could wake the dead. Betty, the owner since the 90s, still wore her hair in the same beehive and called everyone Hun. Today, she gave me a sad little smile as I walked in. "Coffee, Jack? Black, like always?" "Please, Betty." Tom was already in the back booth, the one nobody else liked because the window AC unit rattled right above it. He had a manila folder in front of him, sealed with a rubber band, and 2 mugs of coffee steaming between us. He waited until I slid into the seat and Betty walked away before he spoke. "Pulled some strings last night," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Old buddy at the county coroner's office owed me a favor from way back. Got a copy of Eleanor's full medical file, the stuff they don't hand out to family without a subpoena." He slid the folder across. I opened it with hands that felt numb. The top page was the death certificate. Cause: acute myocardial infarction. Time: 03:17 a.m. on October 12th. Attending physician: Dr. Leonard Hargrove. I frowned. Hargrove? I thought Ellie saw Dr. Patel for her checkups. She did. Last documented visit was 3 months ago. Routine physical, blood pressure a little high, cholesterol normal, prescribed lisinopril and a low-dose aspirin. No cardiac symptoms noted, no EKG ordered, nothing. I flipped to the toxicology report attached at the back. Clean. No alcohol, no narcotics, no unusual substances, just the expected traces of her blood pressure medication. Then how? Look at the signature on the death cert, Tom said, tapping the page. I compared it to the one on the insurance policy change I'd brought with me. The Hargrove signature on the death certificate had the same little flourish on the L as the forged one on the policy. Almost identical. Someone's using the same pen, I muttered. Or the same forger, Tom corrected. And here's the kicker. There was no autopsy. Hargrove signed off natural causes, no suspicion. In Ohio, they don't always do them for heart attacks in folks over 60, especially with a history of hypertension. Convenient, ain't it? My coffee had gone cold. So they could have tampered with her meds? Switched pills? Or worse? Tom leaned in. Possible, but there's more. I called the insurance company this morning, posed as a concerned family friend checking on claim status. The payout request was filed yesterday afternoon, less than 24 hours after the funeral. Claimant, Sarah Harlan Bennett. Primary beneficiary now, per the updated policy. I felt the blood drain from my face. They filed yesterday? While we were still throwing dirt on the grave? Tom nodded once. Fast. Too fast. Most people wait weeks, grieving period and all that. We sat in silence for a long minute. Betty refilled our mugs without asking. When she left, Tom continued. I don't want to jump to conclusions, Jack, but we gotta move careful. If this is real, if someone faked her death for the money, we need evidence that holds in court, not just hunches. What do we do? First, we check the money trail. You said Ellie handled the bills. Yeah, joint checking, savings. I know the online password. She made me memorize it years ago. Good. Tonight, when you're alone, log in. Look for anything weird. Transfers, withdrawals, new accounts, screenshot everything. Don't delete anything. I nodded. Second, Tom said, Sarah and Mark are still at the motel on Route 22. They're supposed to head back to Cleveland tomorrow. Tonight's our window. I got binoculars and a thermos of coffee in the truck. You up for a little surveillance? My heart hammered. Yeah, I am. We paid the bill. Betty tried to comp it, said it was the least she could do, and walked out into the crisp afternoon. The sky had cleared some, but the wind still carried that bite. That evening, around 7:30, I borrowed Tom's old Dodge Ram. It was beat up enough not to draw attention, black paint faded to gunmetal. I parked across from the Pineview Motel, 2 blocks down in the shadows of a big maple. Room 14. Their SUV was parked right in front. I adjusted the binoculars. Through the half-open curtains, motel curtains are never quite thick enough, I could see them. Mark was pacing, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, head in her hands, shoulders hunched. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. For a second, pity flickered through me. Then I remembered the forged signature, the quick claim, the text. They argued for almost 40 minutes. At one point, Mark slammed his hand on the dresser. Sarah stood up, pointed at him, mouth moving fast. No sound reached me, but the body language screamed guilt or fear. I couldn't tell which. Around 8:45, Mark stepped outside to smoke. He leaned against the SUV, exhaling plumes into the cold air, glancing around like he expected to be watched. Maybe he felt my eyes on him. I sank lower in the seat. Back inside, Sarah paced alone for a while, then sat at the little table and opened her laptop. She typed furiously, paused, typed again. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Bank transfers. Offshore. Follow the money. I nearly dropped the binoculars. Same number, same cryptic style. Whoever this was, they were watching too. I texted Tom. Got another message. Offshore transfers. He replied instantly. Get home. Log in now. Call me. I waited until Mark went back inside, then started the truck and drove home, heart pounding the whole way. The house was dark when I got there. I didn't bother with lights, just went straight to the roll-top desk, booted up the ancient desktop Ellie insisted on keeping just in case. Password, our wedding date plus her favorite flower. Logged into the bank portal. First screen, recent activity. My breath caught. Over the past 8 months, 11 transfers ranging from $3,000 to $18,000, all to an account titled Bennett Consulting LLC, all initiated from an IP I didn't recognize. The last one, $12,500, went out 4 days before Ellie died. I clicked deeper. The receiving account was registered in Delaware, a shell company. I screenshotted every page, every transaction detail. My hands shook so badly the images came out blurry on some. I called Tom. "I found it," I said. "Thousands. To Mark's company." He let out a low whistle. "That's it. Motive. Now we need the how and the who." "Tom, what if she's alive? What if they didn't kill her, just hit her?" Silence on the line. Then we find her. But first, we need professional help. I know a guy in Cleveland, private investigator, ex-FBI. Name's Carlos Ramirez. He'll work quiet, and he owes me from a case back in '09. Can we afford him? We'll figure it out. You got savings? Some. Enough. I'll set the meet for tomorrow. In the meantime, act normal. If Sarah calls, be the grieving dad, nothing more. I hung up, stared at the screen full of damning numbers. The next 2 days blurred into a haze of waiting and watching. Ramirez agreed to take the case for a $4,000 retainer, steep, but he promised results. I wired it from the savings account Ellie always called our nest egg. Felt like betrayal just touching it. While we waited for him to dig, I went to the cemetery, brought a bouquet of white roses, her favorite. The grave was still fresh, dirt mounded high, the temporary marker crooked. I knelt in the grass, placed the flowers, and spoke out loud for the first time since the funeral. "Ellie, if you're out there, if this is real, give me a sign, anything. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up without losing my mind." The wind picked up suddenly, rustling the roses, bending the stems. A single petal broke free and danced across the grave before settling on my knee. I picked it up, held it between thumb and forefinger. Stupid, maybe, sentimental, but in that moment, it felt like something. Days passed. Ramirez worked fast. On the 4th day after our first meeting, he called. "Jack, it's Carlos. Got preliminary findings. You sitting down?" "Yeah." Medical records uploaded to the insurance portal 2 days before the death certificate was signed. The file shows a fabricated EKG, classic heart attack pattern, time-stamped after hours at the hospital. IP address traces to a VPN, but the VPN exit node? A coffee shop 2 blocks from Mark Bennett's office building in downtown Cleveland. My mouth went dry. "And the money," he continued. "Those transfers? Routed through 3 different shell companies, all tied back to Bennett Consulting. One of them has an address in the Caymans, offshore, like your tip said." "So it's them." "It looks like it, but here's the thing. There's no body on record at the crematorium. They were supposed to cremate on the 15th. The log shows canceled by family request. Someone called it off last minute. No cremation, no ashes." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles cracked. "Then where is she?" "That's what we need to find out next. I'm pulling hospital surveillance feeds, cross-checking staff who worked that night. It'll take some time. In the meantime, keep your head down." That night, Sarah called. "Dad, we're heading back to Cleveland tomorrow. Mark's got meetings. Want to grab dinner before we go? Something quiet, just us 3. Her voice was bright, too bright. Forced cheerfulness. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Dinner would be the perfect cover, a chance to watch them up close, to look for cracks, to gather one more piece of the puzzle. But mostly, it would be the moment I started fighting back. For Ellie, for the truth. Dinner that night felt like walking into a trap I'd set for myself. The Italian place downtown, Giovanni's, was the same spot Ellie and I used to go every anniversary. Red checkered tablecloths, candlelight that flickered just enough to make everything feel intimate, the smell of garlic and fresh basil hanging thick in the air. Tonight, though, the warmth felt mocking. I arrived early, took the corner booth where I could see the door, and ordered water. No wine. I needed every sense sharp. Sarah and Mark walked in at 7:02, right on time. Sarah looked polished as always, black dress, pearl earrings Ellie had given her for her 16th birthday. Mark in another tailored suit, tie loosened just enough to look casual. They smiled when they saw me, but the smiles didn't sync up with their eyes. "Dad," Sarah said, sliding into the booth beside me instead of across. She hugged me quick, her perfume, something floral and expensive, overpowering the garlic. "You okay? You look tired." "Just the usual," I said, forcing a half smile. "Grief's a full-time job." Mark shook my hand, firm grip, eye contact that lasted a beat too long. "We're glad you came out, Jack. Means a lot." We ordered spaghetti carbonara for me, Ellie's favorite. Sarah got the house salad, Mark the steak. Small talk filled the gaps. Cleveland traffic, Sarah's latest case, some corporate merger she couldn't discuss in detail, Mark's big opportunity in real estate development. I nodded, murmured agreements, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time Sarah reached for her water glass, I watched her fingers. Long, elegant, the same hands that used to help Ellie in the garden. Hands that might have signed my name on that policy. Halfway through the meal, I decided to test the waters. "So," I said casually, twirling pasta on my fork, "I was going through some papers at home, found the updated life insurance policy, noticed the beneficiary change. When did Mom decide that?" Sarah's fork paused midair, just a fraction of a second, but I caught it. Mark glanced at her, then back to me. "Oh, that?" Sarah said, recovering smoothly. "Mom brought it up last spring, said she wanted to make sure we were taken care of, in case anything happened to both of you. She didn't want the money tied up in probate or anything. Practical, right?" "Practical," I echoed. "Funny thing, though, my signature on the change form, it looks a little off, like someone practiced it." The air in the booth thickened. Mark cleared his throat. "Jack, grief can make things look strange. Memory plays tricks." "Maybe," I said, but I compared it to old checks. The loop on the J is perfect. Mine always hitches. Sarah set her fork down. "Dad, are you accusing us of something?" "Not accusing," I lied. "Just wondering." Mark leaned forward, voice low. "Look, if you're worried about the money, we can talk to the insurance company. Make sure everything's above board. But right now, maybe focus on healing." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, healing." Dessert came. Nobody ate much. When the check arrived, Mark insisted on paying. "Family," he said with that too perfect smile. As we walked out to the parking lot, Sarah hugged me again. "Come visit us in Queensland soon, okay? The guest room is always ready." "I'll think about it," I said. They drove off in their SUV. I stood in the cold parking lot until their taillights vanished, then walked to Tom's truck, which I'd parked 2 blocks away. Tom was waiting behind the wheel, engine off, binoculars on the dash. "Well?" he asked. "They lied," I said. "Smooth, but they lied." Tom started the engine. "Good. Now we use it." That night, Tom planted a small GPS tracker under the SUV while they were inside the restaurant. Nothing fancy, just a magnetic box the size of a deck of cards. Borrowed it from an old buddy still on the force. Legal gray area, but we're not cops. We tracked them from the motel to a warehouse on the outskirts of Milford, old industrial park, mostly abandoned since the factories closed. The building was a squat brick relic with broken windows and weeds pushing through cracked concrete. They parked, went inside for 20 minutes, then left. "What the hell are they doing in there?" I whispered from Tom's truck, parked half a mile away with lights off. "Meeting someone," Tom said, "or picking something up." The next morning, Ramirez called with the first big break. "Jack, Carlos here. Warehouse surveillance paid off. Pulled footage from a neighboring business's security cam. Grainy, but clear enough. Sarah and Mark entered with a third person, male, mid-40s, wearing a hoodie. They carried out 2 large duffel bags and a metal case. Looked heavy. Any idea who the third guy is?" I asked. Running facial recognition through my contacts. Preliminary match, Dr. Leonard Hargrove, the same doc who signed the death certificate. My stomach dropped. The forger! More than that, Ramirez said. Hargrove's medical license was suspended 2 years ago for opioid overprescribing. Quiet settlement, no jail time. Now he works off books, private clients, cash only. And get this, 2 months ago, he rented a small storage unit in the same industrial park, paid in cash. So they, what, drugged her? Hid her? Best guess, they sedated Ellie heavily, used a medical mannequin or body double for the viewing and casket, swapped it out before the burial. The real funeral was theater. Real body, alive, moved to a safe location. I had to sit down. The room spun. Alive. My Ellie. Alive. We think so, Ramirez said. No cremation record, no death records beyond the initial cert. And those offshore transfers? Some went to a private clinic in Tijuana, specializes in discreet medical care, long-term sedation, private recovery rooms. I gripped the phone. Then we go there, now. Not yet, Ramirez warned. We need hard proof. Warrants, FBI involvement. If we move too soon, they could move her, or worse. Tom and I spent the afternoon digging. We drove past the warehouse again, daylight this time. No cars, no activity. But Ramirez hacked into the building's outdated security system. Old cameras, weak passwords. Inside footage showed storage crates, medical equipment, a cot in the back corner with restraints. My heart broke all over again, imagining Ellie there. That evening, another text from the unknown number. Warehouse isn't the only place. Check the clinic records. Tijuana, room 217. I showed Tom. This tipster, who is this? Someone on the inside. Maybe a disgruntled employee or someone who knows Hargrove. Doesn't matter right now. Matters that they're helping. Ramirez confirmed the clinic angle. Booked under a fake name, E. Thompson. Paid for 3 months in advance. Cash deposit. Patient listed as sedated recovery post-procedure. We had enough. Tom called his FBI contact, a special agent named Laura Klein he'd worked on a cold case years ago, explained the situation, suspected kidnapping, fraud, forgery, possible medical abuse. Klein listened, asked sharp questions, then said, send everything. If it holds, we can move fast. We compiled the file, forged signatures, bank transfers, warehouse footage, clinic booking, anonymous texts, sent it encrypted. 2 days later, Klein called back. We got probable cause, raid on the warehouse tomorrow. Then we coordinate with Mexican authorities for the clinic. But Jack, you stay out of it. This is federal now. I couldn't stay out of it. The raid happened at dawn. Tom and I watched from a distance. FBI vans, tactical teams sweeping the building. They found medical supplies, sedation drugs, records of patient transfers. No Ellie. But they found a ledger, payments to Hargrove, instructions for long-term maintenance of one patient. Sarah and Mark were picked up at their Cleveland apartment the same morning. No dramatic chase, just agents at the door, warrants in hand. Sarah cried. Mark demanded a lawyer. I drove to Cleveland that afternoon. The FBI let me sit in on the initial interview, behind glass, with Klein's permission. Sarah looked small in the interrogation room, makeup gone, eyes swollen. When they asked about the policy, the forgery, the warehouse, she broke. It was Mark. He said we needed the money. The firm was failing. Debts, so many debts. He said Mom would understand if we just borrowed time, sedated her, kept her safe somewhere, collect the insurance, pay everything off, then bring her back, like nothing happened. Mark in the next room said nothing at first. Then, when confronted with the ledger, he cracked too. We never meant to hurt her, just delay. The clinic was supposed to monitor her. Harmless. She'd wake up eventually. Klein leaned in. You faked her death, forged documents, kidnapped her? That's not delay. That's felony. I turned away from the glass, tears burning. My daughter, my little girl who used to ride on my shoulders in the garage, handing me tools, reduced to this. Ramirez flew to Tijuana with federal marshals. They raided the clinic at 3 a.m. local time, room 217. Ellie was there, thin, pale, hooked to IVs, heavily sedated, but breathing. Alive. They brought her back on a medical flight the next day. I waited at the Cleveland Airport Hospital, pacing the hallway like an expectant father all over again. When they wheeled her in, she was awake enough to recognize me. Her eyes, those same hazel eyes, filled with tears. "Jack," she croaked, voice weak from disuse. I took her hand. It was cold, but it was hers. "I'm here, Ellie. You're home." Behind us, agents led Sarah away in cuffs. She looked back once, mouth forming the word "Dad," but no sound came out. The web had unraveled, the lies exposed, but the damage, that would take years to mend. The call from Special Agent Laura Klein came at 6:14 a.m. on a Thursday, the sky outside my farmhouse window still the bruised purple of pre-dawn. I hadn't slept more than an hour in 2 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ellie's face, pale, sedated, tubes in her arms in some sterile room south of the border. The image twisted like a knife. "Mr. Harlan?" Klein's voice was crisp, professional, but there was an undercurrent of something almost human. "We have warrants. We're moving on the Bennetts this morning, their apartment in Cleveland. You need to stay clear. This is federal jurisdiction now." I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. "I want to be there." "Negative. You stay home. If things go sideways, we don't need a civilian in the mix. We'll call when we have them in custody." She hung up before I could argue. Tom arrived 20 minutes later, coffee in a thermos and a grim set to his jaw. "Klein's right," he said as he poured me a mug. "But we're not sitting this out. We'll drive up, park a block away, watch from a distance. Nothing more." I didn't argue. The thought of staying behind while strangers dragged my daughter out in handcuffs was unbearable. We left at 7:30. The drive to Cleveland took 3 hours, highway miles blurring past, radio off, silence thick between us. My mind replayed every moment. Sarah's first steps in the living room, her graduation cap flying high, the way she used to hug me after a long day at the garage. And now, this. We arrived just before 11. Klein's team had the building surrounded. 2 black SUVs, agents in tactical vests positioned at the entrances, a van with tinted windows parked across the street. Tom pulled into a side lot half a block down, engine off. We sat in the cab, binoculars ready. At 11:17, the agents moved. No sirens, no shouting, just swift, coordinated entry. Doors opened, closed. Minutes stretched like hours. Then Sarah appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 agents. Her hair was down, messy, face pale, no makeup. She looked 20 years younger, like the girl who'd once cried over a broken bicycle. Mark followed, hands cuffed behind him, head high but eyes darting. He spotted the news van pulling up, someone had tipped the media, and his expression hardened. They loaded them into separate cars. Sarah glanced around once, searching, and for a terrible second our eyes met across the distance. Even from here, I saw the recognition, the flash of shame, then something broken. She looked away. Tom touched my arm. "Breathe, Jack." I couldn't. My chest was a vice. The cars pulled away. Klein called moments later. "They're in custody, no resistance. We're taking them to the field office downtown. You can come in an hour. Observation only." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Thank you." We waited the hour in a diner across from the Federal Building. Greasy eggs I couldn't eat, coffee that tasted like regret. At noon, Klein met us in the lobby. She was shorter than I'd imagined, dark hair pulled back, eyes sharp. "They're being processed," she said. "You can watch the interviews from behind the glass, but no interruptions. Understood?" We followed her through security, down fluorescent-lit corridors that smelled of bleach and old coffee. The observation room was small, 2 chairs, one-way mirror. First up, Mark. He sat in the interrogation room in an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed to the table. A lawyer, some sharp-suited guy Klein said was a public defender, sat beside him. Mark looked smaller under the harsh lights, the confidence drained. Then Klein laid out the evidence, the forged signatures, warehouse footage, clinic records from Tijuana, the ledger with his handwriting. His shoulders slumped, he finally said. It wasn't supposed to go like this. The firm was bleeding money, bad investments, debts piling up. Sarah was drowning in it. We needed a way out. So you faked your mother-in-law's death? Klein asked flatly. Not death. Delay. We sedated her. Hargrove handled the meds, switched her pills weeks before. Then the act of heart attack. We used a mannequin for the viewing, custom job, looked real enough in dim light. Moved her to the warehouse, then the clinic. She was supposed to wake up in a few months, confused but fine. We'd have the insurance money, pay everything off, say it was a miracle recovery. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. My Ellie, drugged, hidden, treated like cargo? And Sarah? Klein pressed.
Mark looked down. She fought it at first, cried for days. But the debts, the threats from collectors, she agreed, said Mom would understand, that we'd fix it later. He broke then, shoulders shaking, tears. I never wanted to hurt her, just buy time. The lawyer whispered something. Mark shook his head. No more lies. They moved to Sarah next. She looked even worse. Eyes swollen, face blotchy. She didn't have a lawyer yet. One was on the way. Klein started gentle. Sarah, we know what happened. Your husband confessed. Help us help you. Sarah stared at the table. Minutes passed. Then she spoke, voice cracking. Dad, is he here? Klein glanced at the mirror. He's watching. Sarah's head jerked up. She looked straight at the glass, as if she could see me. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would go this far. Mark said it was temporary, that Mom would be okay. I believed him because I was scared. The firm was failing. We were going to lose everything. The house, the car, our lives. I thought if we just had the money, we could start over. She swallowed hard. I signed the papers. I helped with the policy. I even drove the van to the warehouse that night. But I didn't want her hurt. I sat with her in the back, holding her hand while she slept. I told her I was sorry, over and over. Tears streamed down her face. Please tell him I'm sorry. Tell Mom, I love them. I never stopped. I turned away. Tom put a hand on my shoulder. I couldn't speak. Klein continued. Where is Hargrove? Running, Sarah whispered. He took his cut and disappeared. Mexico, maybe. The interview ended. Sarah was let out. She paused at the door, looked back at the mirror one last time, lips moving silently. Dad. We left the building in silence. The drive home was endless. Tom tried small talk, weather, football, but I couldn't respond. All I could see was Sarah's face, broken, pleading. Ellie arrived the next afternoon, medical flight from Tijuana, escorted by marshals. I waited at Cleveland Hopkins Hospital, in a private room Klein had arranged. Nurses prepped her, IVs removed, monitors quieted. She was weak, disoriented, but conscious. When they wheeled her in, she looked smaller than I remembered. Thin arms, hollow cheeks, but those hazel eyes, still sharp, still hers. Jack, she rasped, reaching for me. I took her hand, knelt beside the bed. Tears I hadn't shed in weeks poured out. You're home, Ellie. You're safe. She squeezed my fingers. What happened? They said something about Sarah? I told her, gently, piece by piece. The sedation, the fake death, the betrayal. Her face crumpled. My baby girl. I know. We sat like that for hours, holding hands, crying, remembering. Nurses came and went. Tom waited outside. That evening, Klein visited. Hargrove's in custody. Mexican authorities grabbed him at a border town. He'll face charges here, too. And Sarah, Mark? They're being charged kidnapping, fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Bail denied. Trial in a few months. I nodded. Justice, but at what cost? Weeks blurred into recovery. Ellie came home to the farmhouse, physical therapy, counseling, slow walks in the garden. She asked about Sarah every day. I told her the truth. Letters arrived, apologetic, tear-stained. I read them aloud sometimes. Ellie listened, eyes distant. One night, 3 months after the rescue, Ellie sat on the porch swing, blanket around her shoulders. The stars were bright, crickets loud. "Jack," she said softly, "I want to see her." I froze. "Ellie." "Not forgive, not yet, but see, talk. She's still our daughter." I called the prison, arranged a visit, supervised through glass. The day came. Ellie dressed carefully, like it was Sunday church. We drove to the facility in silence. Sarah waited on the other side of the partition, thinner, hair pulled back, orange jumpsuit. When she saw Ellie, she gasped, "Mom." Ellie placed her palm against the glass. Sarah did the same. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I broke everything." Ellie nodded slowly. "You did, but you're still my girl, and I still love you." Tears on both sides. Words tumbled. Regrets, memories, promises to try. I stood back, watching. The family I'd built, shattered but not destroyed. Back home, Ellie and I rebuilt slowly. Therapy sessions, quiet dinners, long talks on the porch. Sarah wrote weekly. Ellie answered sometimes. Forgiveness didn't come easy. It was a daily choice, a wound that scarred over but never vanished. But love, real, stubborn love, endured. And in the end, that was enough.
The trial of Sarah Harlan Bennett and Mark Bennett began on March 3rd in the Cuyahoga County Courthouse in downtown Cleveland. Outside, early spring rain had left the stone steps slick and reflective under the gray sky. I stood at the bottom with Ellie on my arm, her grip firm despite the lingering weakness in her left side. She wore the navy coat she'd bought for our 30th anniversary, the one with the small tear in the lining that she'd never gotten around to fixing. Now it seemed fitting, something worn but enduring. Reporters clustered like crows on the sidewalk, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Harlan, will you speak to your daughter's betrayal? Mrs. Harlan, do you still love your child after what she did?" We walked past them without a word. Ellie kept her eyes straight ahead, chin up. Inside the marble lobby, the echo of our footsteps mixed with the low hum of voices. Security nodded us through. We took the elevator to the 5th floor, courtroom 5B, the same room where I'd once served on a minor jury duty years ago. Petty theft. Nothing like this. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, old paper, and nervous sweat. Rows of benches filled quickly, neighbors from Milford who'd driven up at dawn, old garage buddies in their best flannel shirts, a few distant cousins, and strangers drawn by the headlines. "Family betrayal, $1 million insurance scam" had been the local news lead for weeks. Sarah sat at the defense table on the right, dressed in a simple charcoal dress, hair in the low ponytail. No makeup. She looked pale, smaller than I remembered, like the college girl who'd come home crying after her first failed exam. Mark sat beside her, tie knotted too tight, jaw clenched. Their lawyers, two from a high-end firm that had once employed Sarah, huddled over notes, whispering urgently. Judge Margaret Donnelly entered at 9 o'clock sharp. Black robe, silver hair pulled back, eyes that missed nothing. She reminded me of the stern math teacher who'd once made me redo an entire shop project because the measurements were off by a 16th of an inch. No room for slop. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Torres, opened first. She stood at the podium, voice clear and measured. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not a story of accident or impulse. This is a calculated plan born of greed. The defendants, Sarah Harlan Bennett and her husband Mark, faked the death of Eleanor Harlan, the mother and mother-in-law they claimed to love, to collect on a $1 million life insurance policy. They forged documents, sedated their victim, hid her in a warehouse, then shipped her across the border to a clinic in Tijuana, all while the grieving husband and father, Jack Harlan, buried an empty casket. Torres projected images on the screen, the insurance policy with my forged signature, bank transfer records, warehouse security stills showing Sarah and Mark loading crates, the Tijuana clinic intake form under E. Thompson. The jury, 8 women, 4 men, a mix of ages, watched in stunned silence. Then the witnesses began. Tom Riley took the stand on day 1. He walked up with the same steady stride he'd had on the force, placed his hand on the Bible, and spoke plainly. I received a call from Jack Harlan the day after the funeral. He showed me an anonymous text. "She's not gone. Trust no one." We compared signatures. The policy change was forged, same as the death certificate signed by Dr. Hargrove. He described the surveillance, the GPS tracker, the warehouse. When Torres asked if he believed the defendants capable, Tom looked straight at Sarah. I watched that girl grow up, but the evidence don't lie. They did this. Cross-examination was brief. The defense tried to paint Tom as a biased friend. He didn't budge. Bias don't forge signatures, counselor. Carlos Ramirez testified next. Calm, precise, almost clinical. He detailed the digital trail. VPN logs from Mark's office, shell company registrations, emails discussing the package and maintenance dosage. He produced the ledger from the warehouse, Hargrove's handwriting listing payments. Defense tried to poke holes. Isn't it possible these were misinterpreted? Ramirez smiled thinly. Only if you ignore timestamps, IP addresses, and bank records. Dr. Hargrove appeared on day 3, under heavy guard and a plea deal. He looked older than his 48 years, hollow cheeks, trembling hands. He admitted everything, prescribing sedatives over months, forging the death certificate, supervising the transfer to Tijuana. "They paid me $50,000, he muttered, said it was temporary, a coma for recovery. I knew it was wrong. The courtroom murmured. Judge Donnelly rapped her gavel once. Then Ellie took the stand. The room went still as she walked forward, cane tapping softly. She sat carefully, adjusted the microphone, and looked at the jury with those hazel eyes that had always seen straight through me. "Mrs. Harlan," Torres began gently, "describe the weeks before October 12th. Ellie spoke quietly but clearly. "I felt exhausted. My pills tasted strange, metallic. I thought it was nothing. Then I woke in a white room, machines beeping. A man, Dr. Hargrove, said I'd had complications. I tried to speak, but my tongue was thick. They kept me drifting." She paused, eyes moving to Sarah. I heard her voice. Sarah. She sat by the bed, cried, said, "I'm sorry, Mom. It'll be over soon." I couldn't answer, but I heard every word. Torres asked softly, "Did you ever consent to this?" "No," Ellie said. "I never did." The defense cross-examined carefully. "The drugs, could they have caused hallucinations?" Ellie met the lawyer's eyes. "I know my daughter's voice. Drugs don't invent love or guilt." No further questions. I testified the next morning. My hands shook as I swore the oath. I told the story from the beginning, the texts, the discovery of the forgery, the nights I couldn't sleep, the moment Ellie was wheeled into the hospital room. "She looked at me," I said, voice rough, and whispered my name. After everything they'd done, she still knew me. I looked at the jury. I buried a stranger, thought I'd lost my wife forever. Then I found out I'd lost my daughter instead. The courtroom was silent, except for soft sniffles from the back row. Sarah testified on day 6. She asked to speak without her lawyer's prompting. Judge Donnelly allowed it. Sarah stood, hands clasped. "I loved my parents, more than anything. But the firm was collapsing. Debts, collectors calling it 2 a.m. Mark said we could fix it. Fake Mom's death, collect the money, bring her back later. I said no at first. Then I said yes." She cried openly. "I changed the pills. I drove the van. I sat with her in the dark, holding her hand, telling her I was sorry. I thought if I stayed close, it would make it right. It didn't. She looked at us. Mom, Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know I'm sorry, every day. The prosecution didn't cross. What more was there? Mark went last. He tried to deflect, said Sarah pushed harder, knew more details, but the jury saw through it. His voice faded to a whisper by the end. Closings were powerful. Torres, this was not desperation. This was choice. Greed over family. They must be held accountable. Defense pleaded for mercy, remorse, first offenses, potential for rehabilitation. The jury deliberated 3 days. We waited in a small witness room, coffee, stale donuts, endless pacing. Ellie held my hand the whole time. The call came at 4:22 p.m. on the 3rd day. We filed back in. Sarah looked up, eyes red. Mark stared at the table. The foreman read, "Guilty on all counts: kidnapping, conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse, forgery." Sentencing was 2 weeks later. Judge Donnelly spoke directly to them. "You committed the gravest betrayal imaginable. For money, you stole years from Eleanor Harlan's life and trust from Jack Harlan's heart. There is no full repair for that." She paused. "But you have shown remorse. You cooperated. You did not harm Mrs. Harlan physically beyond the sedation." 15 years each. Parole eligibility after 10. Maximum allowable. As deputies led them out, Sarah turned once. Her eyes met Ellie's. She mouthed, "I love you." Ellie raised a trembling hand in response. Outside, the press surged again. This time, Ellie stepped forward. "My daughter did something unforgivable," she said, voice steady. "But she is still my child. We will survive this. Families find ways." We drove home under clearing skies. The farmhouse welcomed us, porch light on, garden beds waiting for spring planting. Months turned to seasons. Sarah wrote letters weekly. Long at first, apologies, prison routines, therapy insights. Ellie read them aloud sometimes, voice soft. She answered occasionally, short notes about the weather, the new tulips, how the porch swings still creaked the same way. I fixed things. The porch boards, the leaky faucet, the loose step. Physical work helped the ache. One summer evening, fireflies dancing over the lawn, Ellie sat beside me on the swing. "Do you think we'll ever see her free again?" she asked. I said maybe. 10 years is long, but possible. Ellie nodded. "Good, because I want to tell her in person that I still love her, even if it hurts." We never forgot the betrayal. It lived in quiet moments, the empty chair at dinner, the unanswered phone on holidays. But we rebuilt. The garden bloomed, neighbors visited, Tom came for coffee, Ramirez sent Christmas cards. And in a prison 200 miles away, our daughter learned remorse, patience, and the slow path towards redemption. Justice had been served, cold, fair, final. But love lingered, stubborn, scarred, enduring. And in the quiet of our old farmhouse under Ohio stars, that was enough.